If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back. 3-2 Battalion Old Boys Club here. I have 3 guests, 2 of them you know very well. Kevin Johnson, Buttons Haynes, and then a new one, but I hope he will come back again. William Skikkerling. Now all of them served in 3-2 Battalion and they're going to tell us about the elite unit. I wish to say to all of you gentlemen, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Kevin, perhaps you can start and just tell us a little bit what's happening in this episode, and then perhaps William can also tell us a little bit of his background.
Good. Well, thanks very much, Chris. Well, this little session today is really all about, having a chat about how the unit actually changed and some experiences that you might have had. So, what we got here is basically sort of 1980 all the way through to, am I correct in saying, Skux, to the closing of the unit?
Yes.
Yeah. So, we've got a good, 14, 15 years here. So maybe if I can kick off, well, I'll tell you what, let's go over to William first to introduce yourself.
My name is William Skikkerling, Skux, as everybody knows me in the army. I was born in Vanderbilt Park, of all places, in 1961. And the same with Koos and Roland de Vries, didn't like it there very much. But joined the army in 1980, infantry school, or School of Infantry. After that, went to 5-Psi until 1985. Then joined 201 Battalion. 86, 87, towards the end of 87, joined 3-2 Battalion until the disbanding of the unit in March 1993, and then a few other places and left the Defence Force in 1995. So that's in short my career.
Well, everyone is familiar with Buttons, so maybe we can then just get into it straight away. So just to start off, I had a guy quite a number of years ago that was at the battalion around about 78, 79. So he said to me, he actually asked me 2 good questions so that he could be brought up to speed about the unit. He said to me, what has actually changed in the unit? Because Kev, you've obviously were there from end of 80 till the end of 83. So I said to him, well, the one thing that did change that you wouldn't be familiar with when I spoke to him was, we came out of those Mossie nester and we went into proper accommodation. So I suppose the one thing that stopped when we moved from the Mossie nest into the proper accommodation is that when we were bored, sitting in the Mossie nester and we weren't drinking, we used to take the old AK-47, take the tips of the rounds off, put a bit of wax in there, and then sit on the bed and either shoot those toilet rolls or wait for the field mice to come into the Mossie nest. So that's one thing I noticed changed when we went into the new accommodation. I think Buttons, am I correct in saying it was LTA that built it?
Yeah, I think so, yes. Probably them, yeah.
Yeah. So these things didn't have windows, it was like sort of mesh wire. So, in wintertime, obviously, it used to get cold in there, but we had methods to keep ourselves warm. So that was the one thing. Then the other thing that I said to him, I noticed is that, in the first sort of 6 months of 81, there was a massive reduction of the foreigners. So yeah, massive reduction. So he reminded me of the word. He said, "Oh, you mean the Philistines?" So I said, yeah, the Philistines. So yeah, it was a massive reduction there. And then the other thing I said to him that had changed in my period was that we went from 3 platoons to platoons, and other companies obviously had 4 platoons, Puma strength, 2 sections, 2 Puma sort of thing. And then he said to me, what hasn't changed? And I said, well, the things that haven't changed, obviously, is a jumbo still in the kitchen, which, when you're in the base, that plays a big role, good food, etc. The boat trips, I said, up and down that river on the Charlie Spiller, that hasn't changed. And I said, I suppose the only other thing that hasn't changed that I can recall was that when we used to troop from Buffalo down there to O'Mahony by 3-1 Battalion, we continued to sleep at the bottom of the runway, just like most bases in Novemberland, you sleep outside. So that's really what I shared with him as to how things change. So what I'm intrigued to know now, Buttons, you were there when I was there, but then you stayed on. So, what were the things that changed and didn't change?
Yeah, I think obviously when I arrived there in 81 October, the Mossy Nesties were still there, so we stayed there for about a year, maybe a little bit longer, and then the guys gradually moved over to the company lines, new ones. Something that was different then was that you could actually build your house according to your amount of people that was involved. So I know that we only had a 2-bedroom Mossy nest, and it was only Jasper and myself. I know that Echo next door was like more like a hall. They had a lot of people sleeping there.
Yes.
Obviously, we were further from the river, so it was quite nice actually to live next to the river, have that toilet that you can sort of look out on the water, and obviously all the swimming and bathing in the river. Yeah, when we then, and the first thing that I actually realized when we moved was, and you must remember this was now also with Echo Victor becoming the commander there. So a lot of things changed then, because I remember when I arrived there, our Mossy nest actually looked like a armory store, because those guys have already then cleared out, and there was enough weapons still in the house to maybe kit out a platoon. So the control wasn't so good those days. I think the storeman didn't know what was in and what was out of the store. So that was definitely one thing. I mean, there was definitely order when we went to the new company lines. More inspections, more like a normal military unit, SAI unit inspections. More organized in company format, in the sense of that you had your weapon store and your kit store. The company commander had a house. The NCOs and officers had their accommodation plus the troops. Proper facilities for ablution facilities and showers. And then also lots of changes in the sense of to get the unit back to a compliant unit. So we had a lot of more visitors there, a lot of visits from Echo Victor or HQ to do inspections, lots of proper parades. That's basically what I can remember. Like you said, the VTB was actually still very good. A little bit more control. You can't just take the boat now, you have to sort of book it. But there were also 2 speedboats, and that belonged to a certain group of people, and they qualified as the only drivers of the boat. So, but that was good. Yeah, basically that was a big change in the sense that there was more a normal military unit situation versus previously, where it was more uncontrolled, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. You know, just as you're talking now, I remember something too. So we moved from these mossy nester, which were like zinc and thatch and you name it, anything wood. We moved to these nice new sleeping accommodations. So one day, Jasper says to me, we're walking up now to the mess. He said, Kevin, he said, I've decided to go into the construction business. I said, oh, really? He said, yep. He said, I'm going to build a mossy nest next to the new lines, and it's going to be a pub. And I can recall the pub went for, what, a couple of weeks, a couple of months before we had to pull it down?
No, he built that pub when he was still at Waters. So
Yes, that's right.
But it was a nice, it was a really sort of a senior construction going on there.
Yes.
Extended, it's extended roof that sort of latched onto the existing roof, and there was quite a nice bar. And when it was, I don't know how long he built that, but it was a few weeks, but it only lasted for one night because we had that party. Let's call it the inauguration. And I still have a photo of all us sitting there the next morning. He fell asleep there. Just with his PT pants and pluckies. That was it. And the next day, I think PV came and broke it down. So that was a function of the bar, was exactly one day. Before the time, we actually had a few dry runs, but after the inauguration, that was it.
And then he had one song, Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah. That's it.
Oh, man, oh, man. Poor Vola. Vola used to be a brandy and coke man, eh?
Yeah. 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 The rest of the guys were rum and coke men.
Yes. Peter Burley, Duppy. So, if we can then move over to Skirks, because obviously, I would imagine that the unit evolved quite a bit. And what I'm intrigued to know is, in my days, Skirk, it was like 7 companies, 4 platoons in them, basically normal light infantry supported by, 81 mortars and 3-2 reconnaissance, which was down at Tamoni. So, I'm sure the listeners will be interested to know, what did it actually evolve into?
When I got to the unit, we were only 6 rifle companies. By that time, Alpha Company was disbanded. Buttons would be able to tell you which year that was. And the troops were all dealt into the other companies. So it was only from Bravo till Golf with the 6 companies. A support company, not mortars anymore. We had the mortar platoon plus an anti-tank platoon plus a machine gun platoon and assault pioneers, so the 4 platoons in the support company. The recce wing, which was moved from O'Mahony back to Buffalo, and they were in the training area at Nova de Marshall. And Wamyaki, as we used to call him, Major Mario Jacobs, who was previously at 5 recce and CSI, who joined the battalion towards the end of 87 as well. And he kind of got the recce group going again in the training area. And training, where Tinus, who you always speak about, Kevin, Tinus van Staden, he was in charge of the training and the training unit. And then what we got also in Buttons, you can tell us more about it, was the support group, which was artillery battery, anti-aircraft battery, and anti-tank squadron, all from armor, anti-aircraft, and artillery corps, and they were under the legendary commandant that stage, Robbie Hodsleaf. Later on in the year, the rifle companies were grouped into 2 ops battalions, Bravo, Charlie, and Golf Company together, and Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot companies together. That formed Ops Group 1, and Bravo, Charlie, and Golf formed Ops Group 2, and support was then used in these groups as needed, basically dealt into 2. Recce Wing was still Recce Wing, and nothing else changed. To when the war ended in 88, 89, the support group then left 3-2, and they all went back to their different units.
Right, right. And tell me, that 3-2 reconnaissance when they were at Mahoney, that sort of manpower, what percentage of that manpower came over to Buffalo?
Buttons, you should be able to answer that better. Not many of them. Most of them joined Swareki at that stage, and that was towards the end of 83, if I remember correctly, 83, 84, with Willem Rutte. What happened in between until they got to Buffalo, I can't really comment on it. Buttons should be able to fill us in.
Yeah, I can't remember how many came over, but the idea was then to, when they stopped at Mahoney, and the groups were dealt into the companies. So each company had 4 to 8 reconnaissance members in the company, and they would then operate either alone or with support from other reconnaissance groups, and then sent out to do reconnaissance. Sometimes it was they deployed with the company, and then from the temporary bases they would then do their reconnaissance in operations. But I'm not sure how many joined and how many stayed over.
Right.
Yeah.
And tell me, talking about Buffalo.
Sorry, Kevin. What I can just say is that I heard about when the Recce group was dealt into the companies, but that changed. Again, when I got there, the Recce Wing was by itself. We didn't have any of the Recce Wing in the companies. They were seconded to us whenever we needed them, like in the old days.
Yeah, it didn't last long. I'm not sure how long, but it wasn't a long period of time when the new group was started in the training area. So I think maybe, right. I'm not sure, maybe a few months, maybe not even a year, and then they and that didn't work out because they weren't enough, too small or too big to support the company. So I think that's when they rearranged the whole setup.
Right. And tell me, talking about Buffalo, Buttons, I mean, you might mention that you became the base commander. So, with, like, when I was there, you had Major van Rensburg, who, obviously didn't used to go to the bush. And with you being an ops guy, now becoming base commander, what would be a typical day for you at Buffalo as the base commander?
Yeah, I'm not sure when it was, but let's say it was 85. I became base commander. Major van Rensburg then left the unit, and I moved into a Terrapin house there at the married quarters. Let me say that there were a few married guys. I remember the armorer was married. Then also Flecky, the transport officer, he was married, and I was obviously unmarried. So I moved in there. At that stage, I was a captain. We had a major or two already. Dan van der Merwe was a major. He was in the training area. Mike Baston was a major. Tom was a major already. And yeah, so it'll be a normal day would be wake up early, like 6 o'clock, go to the office, 7 o'clock, you've got normal parade. And then you would start doing your rounds to all the different departments and see if everything was right. Obviously, we were now busy or close to finalizing all these changes that had to be made. And in the meantime, you would get another list or two from Echo Victor to what you must concentrate on. You also would visit the training area maybe once a week to see how it's going there. Check out on the training that they're doing there. And that stage also, I remember, so it was like a 8 to 5 day or 6 to 5 day. You had order group, I think 9:30 in the morning. And then sometimes in the afternoons, just before 5, you would also maybe get the company commanders back and see how they report what they did. And obviously you did inspections, maybe once a week or so with the companies, just to check that everything was right. A lot of the work that went in those days was to get the logistics compliant. And another big change was then we had to get all the Angolans South African citizenship. So that was quite a big operation that we did then. It was a few weeks that we had Home Affairs there in Buffalo where we recorded everybody, and eventually they all got citizenship. There was a few advantages, obviously being the base commander. So unbeknown to HQ, now you've got a vehicle, and I had let's call it a girlfriend in Rundu. She was a teacher there at an English school. So I would take the Land Cruiser on an afternoon, like 5 o'clock, and I would get me a few friends. I mean, I've obviously distributed the knowledge to say that we're going to Rundu, and then the next morning we return. So how it did work is that I have space for 3 or 4 people, and then you drive to Rundu and you get there about, say, 8 o'clock. Go to Rundu Ontspanningsklub, have a steak or two and a few drinks, and then next morning, 4 o'clock, you're in the road again, and anybody that's behind or not there would obviously not be marked at the parade ground. So but this thing carried on a few weeks, and it expanded because later on we got the Han van der Merwe's Fort 150. So we were a bigger group going over. So I can remember Eric Rabi went with once. So he's a naughty guy. So if you remember, the Rundu Ontspanningsklub had these cubicles like the Spur used to have, where you sit like 6 in a cubicle. So we were sitting on the one side, and then on the other side there were a few female teachers from Rundu, and they were just talking nonstop, very loud. Obviously, we minding our own business, want to have a few drinks, and obviously later on make acquaintance and see how it goes. So Eric stands up and he goes over to them and he says, "Don't you have maybe a headache pill for me? I've got a terrible migraine." So they're all diving into their handbags, and they eventually find 2 top tablets. And this lady says, "This is really good for migraine. I also get migraine." And she gave him the 2 tablets, and he came back to our table and he put the two tablets in his ears. And he said, "Yes, but you guys can make a noise." So that was the end of our any effort that we wanted to get more acquainted with him. Yeah, that was the type of just funny stuff that we did. But yeah, that was basically, it was a normal, let's call it a more administrative job, to get all the departments ready and keep the companies aligned to what the commander would want to, in the end of the day, reach.
And Tommy, who was the sergeant major then at Buffalo when you were base commander?
You know, I worked with PV and also with Umfani Bear.
Right.
Yeah.
So Koos, sorry, go on.
Yeah, Koos was also there, obviously, and Piet later on as well. But in the beginning, it was them. Yeah. So Frans van Staden was there. Koos was there. Koos was more the logistical, let me say, Sergeant Major. He did all the logistics, building. He was overseeing all that type of stuff. Yeah, PV was the RSM, and then I think then PV left. It was in Farn. I remember Farn, when obviously he was married and he used to come to the officers' mess in the evening because he brought his wife there as well. So occasionally he would come down there with his wife, and when he had a few dops in, he used to say, "In elk geval wat," and his wife used to get very irritated because then he repeated in elk geval wat. In elk geval wat, before any sentence, he would start off in elk geval wat, and then she would know this is now time for them to go home. And actually, when I spoke to him the other day, I just made a small comment in elk geval wat, and he says that's still the thing that irritated his wife up to now.
Well, if he wants to get rid of that, he can always go see Frans van Staden.
Yes.
Frans will dig into his subconscious mind and remove it. Well, Koos, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just want to be sure, that you're not talking about me. You're talking about another Koos. It's a very common name. I don't want people to say I claim false glory. I don't. Would that Koos be a Koos Crocodile, or is it another guy?
Yeah, that's Koos Crocodile, yes. That would be him.
Perhaps you boys can tell us a story about that, because we're trying to get him on the show, obviously. And I understand you will come at some stage, but I'm sure there's a lot of people here who want to know.
Yeah, Koos was he was a legend. He was also a very funny guy when he had time, but also a serious guy. I mean, he was a good soldier. He operated, obviously, before I arrived there, he operated with a unit. But when I arrived, he occasionally deployed with certain companies. And the rest of the time, he was also in command of some of the hags. And then later on, more permanently in the base. And then when the unit actually expanded, when Skirks was there, I think he was also part of the support group, and he deployed with them a few times. I remember a few stories about him and Jasper deploying. So I think he was also dealt into that support group afterwards. But yeah, I had the story about his was caught by a crocodile, and the crocodile bit him here on his hamstring, I think, yeah. And it was just in shallow water. Luckily, it wasn't as big, and he's quite a big guy, so he could free himself. But obviously, it was a serious attack, and he spent some months in hospital. And that's where his nickname became Koos Crocodile. He was also, I think, if I'm correct, he also previously deployed to Antarctica twice, maybe 3 times, but as a I think twice as a mechanic, diesel mechanic, and then once as an expedition leader. So that was also quite interesting listening to his stories about their time there. Yep, that's about what I can say without making any mistakes about Koos, and not to forego his show and steal his thunder.
I agree with you there. Well, thanks for that. So any other questions, Koos, before we move on?
Okay, let me ask you, because we've had some questions here about the black troops, the Angolans. How did they live? Where did they live? How were they taken care of?
The little bit I know about it, because obviously maybe we go in the order again, myself, Buttons, and William, because obviously things evolve. I mean, when I was there, they slept behind us. So we were in the Mossy Nester. They slept in tents behind us. Obviously, the married men had places down in the Kimbo, where there was a school, small hospital, etc. So they never used to go out of the base. And I stand to correction that I don't think they used to go to South Africa, for example, on holidays and that. So, you know, early 80s, they were very much confined to Buffalo. What else can I say about them? You know, I said it in my previous videos that maybe because I went by the police and Maleerskop and the structure of rank, and that's a bit different, and that, you know, I always felt back in the 81, I had a fantastic mulatto sergeant, Sergeant Pedro, and I thought to myself, well, why is he going to Five Recce? And to be quite honest with you, I had a long chat with him in the bush and that, and he said, well, you know, you guys just come and go, and I'm the sergeant in the platoon all the time. I must now go and seek a better career. So I felt in 1981, you know, we had plenty time. We didn't have to rush it. I felt that we should have moved them on a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, obviously when we moved to the new accommodation, it was actually very comfortable accommodation. And like Kevin said, in the Kimbo, they had houses that were built for them. And eventually, initially it was like these wooden houses, but later on it became more permanent structures as well. Later on, there was also a Savi, which was like a shopping a shop, quite a big shop that had all the facilities and stuff that you can buy, anything that you can buy in South Africa, basically. There was a clinic, like Kevin said. Then also the ladies became with the women's organization. They had courses, you know, how to develop yourself, how to better yourself, and yeah, if you look at the messes where the troops ate, same food that we had, they also had. Jumbo was in charge of all those kitchens, so you could easily. I used to go and do inspections at the NCOs and the officers' mess and the Kimbo. So it was the same food. Later on, they, like you said in the beginning, they were confined to base, but when they did go on leave, they could go to wherever they wanted to in Namibia. But later on, they did go on holiday in South Africa, because then they had South African citizenship, so they could go there. So it became better. Yeah, I think they were well looked after. It was just a situation, yeah, where are we going with them when the war ends? And that's another story. And maybe Skux can talk about that when they moved to Pomfret.
I was going to tell you a story about that women's organization. So, you know, there at Buffalo, of course, you get a period where you're preparing to go to the bush, or you're just on a holiday, or you've got maintenance duty, and then you're in charge of the guards for the night. So this particular day, I'm like the guy that's now in charge of the guard. So you're up at the HQ and you drive down to the Kimbo as well. So I go, oh, here comes trouble. Here comes big trouble. They bring, is it 40 beer? They're from Pretoria. They bring these women to Buffalo. And I think there was a musician with them as well, but the women are there and they're models. And they're going down to the Kimbo and they're going to model. So, of course, some of the men get to hear about this and they're sitting there in the pub and they're drinking and that. And a whole lot of the boys get onto the truck and they go down there. Now, all things good so far. And they get down there. I didn't go because I was up at the HQ, but apparently there was some form of T-ramp there where they were going to walk and model. And where this thing comes like to the T, that's where the money was sitting. And some guys couldn't help themselves. And when these women were like sort of modeling there, they were taking their wallets out and they were throwing it up onto the T-ramp. Won't mention the names of the guys, but yeah, different animals those days. Right, over to you, Skux.
Yeah, basically when I got to the unit, it was the same as Button said, you know, the single troops stayed in the lines there we were. It was one long building per platoon with 3 rooms in it. And there weren't many of them, you know, we'd look at maybe 3, 4 of, no, let's say about 10 or 10, 12 per platoon staying in each room, or not in each room, in each building, with about, let's say, 3, 4 per room. And the majority were in the Kimbo, all the married guys. Then when we moved to Pomfret, the whole unit got down there. I was on course, but what happened is everybody moved into tents while they were busy building the town, which was a few months. And then when the town was finished, the married troops all moved into permanent houses, brick houses. And the company lines were established again for the NCOs and the troops. And then you had the single quarters for the leader group, and all the married people staying in the old town. And the senior people are company commanders, we were all together in houses. 3 or 4 of us per house, myself, Joe Maria, Titron, and Ben Fenter. We shared a house, 4 majors at that stage, House of Lords, as the house was known, and also very well known for the parties. But yeah, that was how it was in Pomfret.
And tell me, William, just as a matter of interest, moving away from the SPs, I remember in 1981, towards the end, there were 3 of us that wanted to go and do the 1 parachute battalion course. So we started to train and all of that. And then we were told, you know, we were all PF, we got to concentrate on going to Mafafa school for the 106 and the mortars, and the following year we must go on the DEMS course and then maybe the parachute. So that was all forgotten. So what I noticed, you know, looking at the history of 3-2, there seem to be a lot of guys like Skierpers and that all got their wings on that. Was that just for operational reasons, or did they were just simply allowed to go now on those courses?
You're talking about Gustav Skierpers and Piet Fourie and those guys. They went on these courses because they were allowed to go. That was not really operational need for it. But it changed in Pomfret. When we got to Pomfret, Tinus van Staden actually came up with the initiative that to get as many of the troops para-qualified. So there was a few courses, a lot of them went on. And in the end, we had, I know definitely in Ops 1, which was Tinus's Ops Battalion, he had a full company, qualified para. And in Ops 2, where we were, there were also, roughly guessed, also about 100 or so. So that was, like I said, Tina's did that, the initiative. And that was more for operational reasons, but was never actually used in operations.
Right, right. And tell me, William, you know, because Buttons organized that we could go up to Buffalo for the closing of Buffalo. Could you give us just some context to where were you when you got the news that you guys are moving from Buffalo to Pomfret?
This slowly evolved. At that stage, when this whole thing started, my company, as well as Charlie company, Joe Maria's company, we were deployed in defensive positions at Slavik, just north from Slavik on the Angolan side. We got the message that there are choppers going to come from north and fly over us and going to land at Hippo Pools next to the river, where they're going to have a meeting with somebody. So these choppers came over to MI7s, came over, they landed, they had the meeting, they left. So later on, we got the message, okay, this was negotiations to end the war. If you go and look at what General Rolando Vries said about the starting of Resolution 435. So we knew something was breeding, and then they came over a second time, and then Joe's company was withdrawn, and only my company stayed behind, and they came over a third time, and then they said, yeah, that all South African troops must now leave Angola. So we were the last people to cross the bridge back into Wambuland. And that was the beginning of it. And we had many questions of what's going to happen now. Is this now really going to be the end of the war? And slowly but surely, the news trickled in, yes, the Resolution 435 is going to kick in. The war's ending and everybody's going to go back to South Africa. So we didn't know, okay, what's going to happen to 32 Battalion? They said, right, they said, they're South African citizens, the troops will not be left behind. They're going to move the unit down to South Africa. That was more or less September, October in 1988. And then later on, the OC at that stage was Colonel Micho Delport, later became a brigadier general. And then he came and he said, okay, guys, listen, the whole unit is going to move down to South Africa, and we're going to move to a town called Pomfret, which is an old asbestos mine in the Northern Cape. It's suitable for the unit, and that's where we're going to build a new town, and the unit will operate from there when whatever role is going to be needed for in the future. We all thought, yeah, maybe we're just going to move down. There's still going to be some war action somewhere, but that never actually got down to it. The role of the unit changed completely. So that is it. We moved down started in April 1989. I went on course, so I was not there for the whole time, but it took about 2 months for the whole unit to move down.
Right, interesting. And tell me, over to you, Buttons. I'm just intrigued to know, when you were at infantry school and you were obviously in the office of the Minister of Defense, did the personnel there sort of inquire from you sort of what the unit was all about, et cetera, how much did they really know about the unit? Because I know when I used to go on course there to infantry school, the war was never spoken about.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at School of Infantry as a Company 2IC, obviously when you did training with the troops, you did have questions from individuals about How would you do it? Do you do the same drills as that we do? And so you'd have that type of discussions, but not seriously in the sense that they were inquisitive about, like you say, they wasn't actually spoken about. Not in those days. Yeah, and maybe at the ministry, everybody knew where I was from, but yeah, I had certain discussions with some of the other private secretaries that were in civilian departments, not in the military. But yeah, not actually seriously.
Yeah. And then, William, back to you, if you know where to progress the unit. I mean, what was the background sort of to the closing down? Because obviously, we were all invited, and I did intend the closing down of the unit at Pomfret. But what was the background to the build-up? Did you know it was coming for a long time, or was it a surprise?
Oh no, that was a huge surprise for all of us. What actually happened, it was the 14th of July, 1992. I still call it the Winter van 14 Julie, as the old movie, Afrikaans movie. I was in the SO2 Ops office when all the majors and sergeant majors were called to the OC's office. It was 2 o'clock the afternoon approximately. And we were sitting outside his office. Nobody knew why we were there. And then all the OC, Colonel Delport, and all the commandants and the RSM came out of his office, and they said, okay, let's go inside and talk. So we sat down. Colonel Delport had a big conference table in his office. So we sat there, and Michael Delport just sat there, and he said, okay, listen, there's no nice way to tell us. It's going to be announced tonight that 3-2 Battalion is going to be disbanded. Came as a very big shock, of course, to all of us. We just sat there looking at each other, and they said there's our generals flying in this afternoon, and they're going to come and brief the whole unit on it. I can't remember which generals were there. It was not the chief of army, he was on leave. But the others came, they landed. The whole unit was then in companies in a box formation around on the parade ground. And this general came up and he made the announcement to the troops. Everybody just stood there. We didn't know what is going to happen. We just flabbergasted. So after that, we said, okay, the Colonel Delport said, everybody go to the pub. And he walked in there and he said, all right, he said to the barman, this pub closes tonight when I say so, and everything is in the house. So we had a bit of a party, and that specific night, to come back to Koos Crocodile, I remember he was standing there next to the pub, and at one stage, he just pulled out his 9mm and he shot a hole in the roof. Everybody was just quiet after that, and everybody started laughing. He put back his pistol, and the party continued. That was Koos that broke the ice for us. But yeah, that was day one. Again, lots of questions, and a lot of involved after that until the unit disbanded in March 93.
And did any senior brass come down pretty soon to speak to you guys?
No, not that I recall. No, that was it. That was only the generals that came in that night, and they flew out about an hour later. They had a drink with us in the pub, and then they left. But no, lots of meetings, but not high brass that came to speak to us, no.
Yeah. I'm going to say something now, which I'm quite a spontaneous person, but this particular thing I'm going to share with you now, I've actually given some thought to it in the build up to this video. We can either include it or we can cut it out. But when I left in 83, thanks to Buttons, he got me to go up to Buffalo. So that was a connection again with the unit. I never belonged to any of the like sort of associations and that. And then I got obviously invited to Pomfret. So when I left in 83, I really just concentrated on my career, but I had quite a bit of experience in the police, obviously in the unlisted unit and things like that. And when I saw that news that 3-2 had gone into a township, I was livid. I was livid. So much so that at about 11 o'clock that evening, for what it's worth, I went to the police station and I asked to see the officer on duty, because in the police, there's an officer on duty, a captain or a major, driving around to visit the stations. He got there about 2 o'clock and I spoke to him, and then there was a rear admiral, a vice admiral from the military HQ that phoned me, and I was up for a fight, but he was such a nice guy, and he just basically agreed with me that, I mean, we somehow should have found it in ourselves, in that military, with all that personnel, to have said, look here, this is just not right to put them in there. We're setting ourselves up for a disaster. But anyhow, that's my view. I shared it also with Edward McLaughlin in those days, because I phoned him the next day. Mac. You guys know Mac Button? Do you know him well?
Yeah, I know him well. He's
Yeah.
actually,
So there we go.
he actually visited here a few weeks ago.
Right. Well, guys, that's all the questions that I have, and I am mindful that it's almost on the hour. So maybe, Chris, if we can leave it over to you. If you guys okay for another sort of 10 minutes?
Well, I hope they are, because I've got quite a few questions here. I've been making notes, I've got my pen here. I recall the disbandment of 3-2 Battalion. I was at university, I think in my second year BURIS, and people were most unhappy about it. And I remember there was an incident in Parliament as well. Somebody gave someone 30 rands in coins, in silver coins. So people were very, very angry about it. But let's go back to better days. I have to ask first, what made the foreigners leave, these Philistines you talk about? Were they worked out, or were they just getting fed up and just left?
Well, if I can answer from my side, I mean, I think that to get accuracy to it, you've got to think of the ones that you worked with. The ones that I work with, they were ex-parachute battalion here in the UK. Obviously, they all went via Rhodesia, etc. They just didn't like the bush trips where you land somewhere and then it's just walk, sleep, walk, sleep, walk, sleep. They were always not happy about that. Obviously, a few adapted, and that's why the few stayed on. But that, to me, that was the reason why my ones left. Was there something happening behind the scenes? Well, I was too junior to know that, but, practically at the coal front course, that's their reasons that they were giving.
And now I've been asked also by a viewer, who named that boat, which I think you call Charlie's Pillar or something. What's the story there? Why that name?
That's a very good question.
The story I've got with the Charlie Spiller is the Charlie Spiller was brought down from Angola somewhere by an engineer sergeant or staff sergeant, and his name was Charlie Spiller. That's where the boat got its name from. That's the story I've got. I can't say it's the truth.
And then I must ask about that toilet which Buttons was telling us about, was looking out over the river. I mean, is this like an open plan toilet, or what do you mean by that?
No, that was obviously you needed a toilet. It was a long drop, but this specific one that I'm talking about was was a toilet for Malta-house. So it sort of had a view over the river, and it was like on top of a small little hill. And that's where you either read your book or where you reminisced a little bit in the afternoons or mornings. Yeah, and then occasionally they would come from behind, drop a smoke grenade inside there, and blow up the toilet. So that was also some of the fun that happened there. It was obviously not funny at that stage, but we had a few of those incidents as well.
Now I have to ask, sorry, Buttons, you want to continue there with the smoke bombs? Okay. I've got to ask something here. 32 Battalion, if we look back at it, is a legendary unit. It's probably one of the most famous in South African military history. But at the time, did you people feel you were busy with something special here, that you knew you were a cot above? And I don't want to make any other unit lesser, I'm not saying that, but did you feel special?
I think as young men, for me, where you felt special was the look you used to get when you were on a plane, or if you couldn't get a flossie back to Ace Supply to Cape Town where I lived, and you go SAA, you get that look because of the beret. So that does push your chest out a bit. But I mean, I can only speak for myself at Buffalo. I mean, to me, it was like a holiday resort. So that's what it was. It was a place of enjoyment with good buddies.
Yeah, I would say that obviously, like Kevin says, there's a lot of young people. Some were permanent force, others not. I think what for some people like made it special was obviously you had to go through a certain selection. You had to do certain operations before you got your beret. So there was a esprit de corps and a group camaraderie. But I think it was a question of you were in a unit and you had specific tasks to do, and you did it as well as you could. Didn't have really a choice in the sense, because there was a war going on. And obviously you knew that you were in a special unit and you were capable of doing maybe more than a normal person would be able to do. But also there were other units that were just as good. And you would find that in other units as well. They also have a group bonding, a special feeling for each other, esprit de corps for each other. And but that was how I sort of experienced it.
Yes, it didn't change. That when I got there, you wore your previous unit's beret for 6 months, and then you had to either write a letter or a statement that went to HQ in Rundu, and then the signal will come back to Buffalo, and then the base OC will tell you my time was Don van der Merwe, and he said, yeah, okay, you can now wear the beret. And that was the tradition until the unit disbanded. I could just say that, when we got down to Pomfret, we started with deployments in far northern Transvaal, the old Soutpansberg military area where Colonel Bowman was. That was more our line, that you do patrolling, but it was very low scale. Until, gosh, when was it? Early 90, when we started deploying in the townships. And the first townships we went to were in the Pietermaritzburg area, which was a bit of a challenge in the beginning because it was totally new for the troops all of a sudden to patrol in a township and not in the bush. But because they were professional troops, they very quickly adapted, and they started using the minor tactics they used in the bush, and they made it practical in the townships. And we actually caught a lot of crooks, people with illegal firearms, with the tactics that they used. Very successful, and then we moved into bigger scale operations in the townships in Tokoza, Katlong, Vosloorus area, where we did coordinate search operations with all three companies together and other units detached to us. And that was also very successful. Of course, the discipline in the unit changed a lot from when I got there in '87. More parades, which actually forced the troops to be more disciplined.
I spoke to Boris. I asked him that question in one of the episodes, why 3-2 battalion was ever used in townships. And he said to me, well, as far as he knows, and well, it was under his command, it had nothing to do with anything. It was just simply the unit was there and they could be deployed. And no one foresaw the incident which happened then afterwards.
You know, with my time in the police, and I was the first intake of Lotelunga, so we were 4 platoons, national service, and then we went to Malierskop, and if the riots didn't break out, we were going to go to Rhodesia. And, you know, it's maybe I feel strong about it because of my background there in the police for 2.5 years. And I just felt, you know, if a 19-year-old can see it in 76, then why aren't the generals seeing it? They should have just built up that Lotelunga into a bigger group, 2, 3, 4 companies. It was easy to get them seconded from the army because you get them seconded. I mean, I was getting 10 times more pay than a guy that was doing national service. So there was no problem in seconding matriculants. They could have built up a formidable, you know, active 2 years and also citizen force around the Lotelunga in the police. And they had Kufut to go and give the guys some training, and they would have sat with, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 well-trained policemen. But anyhow, it's all history.
Yeah, it's all in the history now. And it's a sad ending what happened to 3-2 battalion. I wonder if we should talk a few minutes just about that. What happened after the disbandment? Because there might be people here who doesn't know. And remember, our idea here is that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we might not even be alive, and somebody else will perhaps watch here and he would probably want to know what happened then. What happened after the last parade?
Well, the only thing that I read, and truly it's the only thing that I read, was, I think it was on 6-1 Mechanized website, where, you know, it was one thing, like I think one of the commandants said, you know, it was working with them in Angola, you know, they were part of another unit. And so it all assimilated nicely. But now, those who went to 6-1, the commandant was saying, wow, now it was becoming challenging to obviously integrate because, you know, they've grown up differently. They operated in a unit that was differently. And I would imagine age must have played a role.
Oh, that's true. If you take the unit in Pomfret from, let's say, 1990 onwards, the unit participated in exercises at Loatla, and it was different deployments. So the troops got a more adapted to the normal South African Defence Force life than it was at Buffalo. So when the unit disbanded, all the troops, not a single one was left behind. Everybody was transferred to other units. All the people that were para-qualified were transferred to 1 parachute battalion. A lot went to 6-1 MEC, 2 Psi, 7 Psi, and 111. I think that was about it. So that was where everybody went to. Then 2 Psi actually moved to Pomfret, and that's where they still looked after the old people. until two site closed down. I don't know when. That was latter part of the 90s. And then things just fell apart at Pomfret. It's now.
If you say it fell apart, what do you mean?
Well, support to the town was stopped. In the older part, there was maintenance on the buildings. They had the water, they had electricity. They had support, but then everything was withdrawn, and they are on their own. They have to go outside and go and work and take the money back. And maintenance it's by itself, and medical it's for by themselves. Just no support to them, except for some organizations that go in to go and assist them.
So I'm correct if I say there's a real need to support these people at Pomfret?
Absolutely. I don't know how many people are there. I haven't been there for 25 years. But from what I heard via the grapevine, it's not going well at Pomfret.
So if someone's listening here and somebody wants to support them, what do they do?
Yeah, maybe the best way to do it, I know that the Veterans Association are quite involved there with some other organizations. So the best way to find out what to do and how to help would be to get in contact with the Veterans Association, 32 Battalion Veterans Association. And I'm sure that they will be able to tell you exactly what is needed. Yeah, because we occasionally get requests from them and also from other organizations that work with them on how can we support them and how can we help them to make life easier for the people there. And I think mostly also, I might talk under correction, but some of these people are old now and they haven't got the support that they would have had when they were still in a normal unit. So, and some of them, I think, received their payouts, and obviously their money wasn't good enough to last them that long, which is a normal situation if you maybe retire on not so good pension. So a lot of these guys are struggling, but I know that the Veterans Association do a lot of good work there amongst other organizations as well.
Well, we're going to be doing those 9 videos. We've done one already on entrepreneurialism, and obviously Koos is going to put the bank details of the association on there. I've already got the details now from the association. And I mean, some of the material I'm going to share with people, you pay a lot of money for that type of material, and it's going to be free, and we're just going to ask the people to please contribute, and then we'll tell the association that the money that comes off this platform is for Pomfret.
Yes, I will also put the PayPal link down below in the description. So if somebody is perhaps overseas and they are able to contribute, I'm quite sure that the money will be used as it should. I think they also asked us, Kevin, that we put the word legacy or something in front of it so that we can just know.
Correct.
So that they know where the money is coming from, because this channel can help. I mean, there's thousands of people here, and if it's possible to assist, then of course we will assist. But do you think in general, the 3 of you, was there any chance that this unit could have survived in the changes which came? I mean, could it have been done differently from what happened?
Well, if you look at the reconnaissance units, I thought about this. They sort of continued, but maybe because the manpower was less there, and so that was easier than 32 Battalion. But we'll never be able to answer this question, and that is, if we had kept them out of the townships, would the ANC I assume it's the ANC, had a different view on them. I suppose we'll never know.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult question to answer, because if one is critical about this, or I mean, like, obviously the unit arrived in South Africa already with a certain amount of stories that went around. So they had some baggage, according to the politics. And I think the integration, I mean, I wasn't involved there. I know that a lot of people were unsatisfied because the unit was dissolved. How else you could have handled it, I'm not sure, but I think proper, better planning could have made the difference. Better negotiations could probably have made a difference. Yeah, and I think my personal opinion is that they didn't think about the people part of it that thoroughly, because that's why we're sitting with the problem that we are sitting with. And then obviously it's been politicized from the day that they were disbanded up till now still. And that's a difficult situation.
Well, you know, the bottom line is it is what it is. And, you know, it's like everything else. When a group of people backs up against the wall, you know, it's survival. And for them to operate out of Pomfret and make themselves financially viable, I would imagine must be very tough. So, you know, if nothing comes from the so-called leader element, I'm not sure where it's going to come from.
I can tell you guys a story. As you know, after I left the police, I went to university for 5 years and then law school, articles, blah, blah, blah. But I ended up in a very famous human rights law firm, which had Mr. Mandela and everybody as clients. And there I am, a very junior attorney, did my training in Afrikaans, sitting in Johannesburg, everything is in English, it's not the same language in law. And I met these people, I'm not going to mention names, but very, very high. And I asked them, I said to them, this was just after Operation Boreas, that attack, that thing in Lesotho. Uncle Boris do talk about it in one of the coming episodes. Now, I asked them what's going on with the army, and the feedback I got was that they were deliberately running down the army because they were scared of a coup d'etat or something happening from the army. And I recall this guy saying to me, he's very, very senior, and he said to me, don't worry about it, because there will be a new generation of officers coming out in the next 20 years, and we will rebuild it. And in the meantime, we will just run them down as we did to the police. Now, I can't say that was official policy. I suspect it might have been. And looking back now, what's it, 57 years, almost, since 3-2 Battalion was disbanded. I wonder if they were not a victim of circumstances.
Well, in the bigger scheme of things, whether it's South Africa or whether it's abroad, you know, there will always be casualties. I suppose for me, in sort of wrapping up this session in my mind, is to actually take the advice that France gave us on Friday, which is, you know, if we're going to help the SPs and that, you know, that we stay in our circle of control. What capabilities do we have that we can help them, rather than going into that other circle where, you know, you're trying to pull in organizations or people where it's just never going to happen?
Yeah, I think you got a good point there. I mean, we can change what we can change and the rest we cannot change.
Yeah.
But I think what we can do is we can honor and remember the glory days. I think in military history, there's never been a unit like that. And there probably will never be a unit like that. And a lot of books were written, and videos like these, I'm sure, will keep the memories alive. And that is perhaps the only thing we can do right now. Is there anything else, if you guys can leave like a final message to the 3-2 Battalion memory, like a legacy memory? What would you guys say? What did you say when you look back?
Well, I've always said it consistently. For me, it helped me tremendously in my business life. That's number one. And for me, if I look at that unit, I'm talking about especially at Buffalo in downtime. I mean, unbelievable memories.
Yeah, I have to agree with what Kevin said. It was unbelievable memories, an extremely professional unit, and their spirit of corps. That's what I will take from it.
Yeah, I've said what I've said. I mean, I'll just concur with what these guys said. I mean, that is it. Nothing more to say.
The most memorable words: dank vader dank, slaan die duivel met 'n plank.
Yeah, and here we are. I mean, thank God we survived, and we can talk about it. Others, rest in peace. They didn't make it.
I agree with you there, Buttons.
Absolutely.
I have to thank all of you for your time. When we look back at 3-2 Battalion, you know what? I prefer to remember those proud men. I prefer to remember them as young men. And I prefer to remember them as the best infantry unit probably ever produced. To all of you listening here, you're welcome at the show. None of you were unimportant. Don't think just because you went home and nobody wanted to know. You know what? The statistics on this channel proves to me that people do want to know. They do want to know your story. There's no way in the world, if they're not interested, that they're going to listen to 2 years and 2 months or something every month for videos here. So if you have a story, even if you were not in 3-2 Battalion, not in Special Forces, whatever, you're welcome here. Please contact me and we'll take it from there. And as I always say to you, until we meet again, God bless.